Okay.
Should be good to go.
Okay, we're good?
Yes.
All right. Well, again, thank you for joining me today during your lunch hour. It's very much appreciated. So today we're going to talk about microaggressions and unconscious bias. So the topic changed a little bit, but I felt like this was kind of where we are in our training. So it was an important topic to kind of cover unconscious bias before we go into the NLI training, which will be later next month. So we're just going to like briefly touch on some topics here, not a lot of detail, do a couple of activities on both topics, and then just really have some really good, robust discussions. And because we have a small group today, we're going to do a lot of things just together as one group instead of breakout sessions. That's okay. Okay, so to kick us off, we all have the same strategic goal of the 50 2x 98. And if we look at the 50 and the 52x 98, that specific goal is around increasing the RE diversity on our teams by 50%. But what that doesn't mean is that there's this quota that we have to fill, right? That we have this number. What it's saying in essence is that we have this great opportunity to expand diversity on our teams to achieve greater organizational success. And the way we're going to do this is because studies show that if you have diverse and inclusive teams, they outperform. And that's what we want to do, right? We want to outperform. We want to have that competitive advantage, and we want to make a lot of money as a company. So you may say, well, what does this have to do with our today? So in order for us to be successful and to have that high performing organization, we have to become more culturally competent individually. So that's why we're doing this training, to expand our diversity and our knowledge about diversity so that we can become a culturally competent organization and be able to interact, right, with a variety of people, understand, different perspectives, different cultures from our own, and different situations, how to handle those within our teams and within our customer groups as well, right? So today we're going to talk about these two, unconscious bias and microaggressions. And before we go any further, I want to talk about our agreement and norms. I call it the 3 C's: confidentiality, communication, and commitment. Just commit to being present and fully engaged in the conversation. Communicate open, honestly, share stories, experiences, ideas, because I'm sure somebody will learn something from each other. And then confidentiality in terms of, not maybe sharing names and anything kind of we discuss here that may be confidential, just kind of keep it within this session. Everybody agree to that? Okay, good. And, we also have the chat that we will use. And, if you agree with somebody or you want to second their opinion, always welcome to use the plus sign as part of this as well. Okay, so most of us believe that we can control the information that influences our decisions, right? But when it comes down to it, can we really? So I want us to take this test. And what the test is we're going to watch this video and listen to the instructions. And as a group, she's going to ask us to repeat some things. And what I want you to do is just come off mute and as a group, say out loud what she's asking you to do. So let's get started. And if you can't hear the video, let me know.
There's a simple test that's been making fools of us since the 1930s. Can you beat it? You'll see words printed in different colors. Just name the color of each word you see as fast as you can. Don't read the word, just name the color of the letters. For example, yellow, blue, green, red. Got it? Try it for yourself. Ready? Go.
Yellow,
green, blue, red, green,
blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, green.
Pretty easy, right? Now that you know what you're doing, try it again with one small change. Remember, name the ink color, not the word. Ready? Go.
Green,
green,
blue, red,
yellow, red, yellow, blue, green, green, blue, yeah, red,
Was that
green,
just as easy?
yellow.
No.
Yeah,
But why?
but why? Why was it? It was easy to an extent, and then did notice towards the end it got a little harder. It's hard, right, to kind of name the words or name the colors and not the words because what you see on the screen. So this exercise demonstrates, how we make those connections to the words and the colors below a conscious level. So at an unconscious level, and we don't even know that we're doing this most of the time. When that connection is broken, when we really have to think about it, think about that answer, it takes us a little bit of time, right, to get it right. So this is what we call unconscious bias. Colors are one thing, however, our decisions and how we think and make decisions and lead in the workplace and how we're influenced by that is another aspect of this. We call it implicit or unconscious bias. So you'll hear me say both of those names. So we're going to
There's a simple test.
talk about what is unconscious bias. So unconscious bias is actually a preference or it's a prejudice for or against something. And not all biases are bad, right? So we have biases for and preferences for our family, right? In certain situations, we have preferences for, the colleges that we went to, maybe an actor that we like, a favorite sports team. So not all biases are bad. The issues arise when we positively or negatively impact someone with our bias, and it creates an unfair advantage or disadvantage for someone else. So this implicit, this unconscious bias, it happens mostly without us even knowing it. And experts say about 90% of the decisions that we make come from our unconscious minds. That's a pretty big number, right? It's just that our brains are just wired to make these mental shortcuts that we process this information that's coming to us, millions of pieces of information every second. And then our history, our stereotypes, our generalizations, and our cultures, that's the filters that information goes through. And that's how we make those decisions. For example, if I said to you that I like what goes with peanut butter, you would say
Jelly,
jelly, right?
banana,
Bananas. Yeah. So, and if I also told you that for Thanksgiving, like my family makes dressing for Thanksgiving, you may say, well, my family makes stuffing for Thanksgiving. It's different. It's an assumption, and sometimes those assumptions can be incorrect, and not it might not be aligned with our conscious thoughts and our conscious beliefs because they're just automatic. And sometimes this will cause us to react, behave in a way that is unintentional, right? And that has consequences not only for ourselves, but for others. So I want to do another quick exercise with you really quick. What I want you to do is if you have a sheet of paper or if you can use your laptop, but if you have a pen and something to write on, I want you to number the numbers 1 through 5. So if you want to type it on your laptop or in your notes or on a sheet of paper, just 1 through 5. And what I want you to do is think about 5 people that you absolutely trust the most. And trust could be defined however you want to trust it. Try to exclude family members if you can. And we won't share the list with anyone else. I just want you to think about 5 people that you trust the absolute most. And so I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it. I know sometimes it's hard. If you don't have 5 people that's not in your family, then it's okay to include those family members. All right, give you a few more seconds. All right, we got 5 or at least 3 people on the list. Good. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call out a few diversity dimensions. And what I want you to do is to put a tick mark or check mark next to those individuals that are similar to you. So for example, we're going to start with gender. So if you identify as male, then put a tick mark next to the names of those who are on your list that also are male, and vice versa for female. So if you're female and you have females on the list, put a tick mark next to that person who's similar. Okay, so the next category is race or ethnicity. So if you have individuals on your list who are similar in race and ethnicity, put a check mark or tick mark next to them. All right, the next category is age. So individuals who are similar in age, put a tick mark. Next category is sexual orientation. Those that are similar, put a tick mark. Next one is professional background. So anyone with a similar professional background. And then lastly is religion. So anyone who has a similar religion, put a tick mark. All right, so looking at your list, is there anything that you notice? I see some smiles. Anything stand out?
Well, in certain categories, like it's all the way down the line the same. Not all the categories you were listing, but some of them it's like, oh, yeah.
A majority. A majority for me.
Majority for you? Okay. Anybody else? Similar? Same? Yeah. So in looking at that list, these are people who we are typically likely to favor, to praise, reward, pay greater attention to, people who are similar to us versus those that are not similar to us. It's a preference. It's called affinity bias. It's a preference for people who are likely like ourselves, and it's mostly instinctive and unconscious. But think about the workplace. What would be some implications in the workplace of having this affinity bias? What do you think?
Having a preference to choose someone to work with or choose someone to do something that is very similar to me.
Right. Choose people who think like you, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Creating products or services for people just like you.
Just like you. And why is that? Why would that be an issue?
Because there are a lot of other people that might not want that product or service in the same way.
Right, right. And it limits creativity too, right? Because everybody thinks the same, right? What else? What other kind of implications?
Hiring or how we have project teams could be influenced.
Yeah, absolutely, April. Absolutely. Our hiring decisions. So decision-making decisions and hiring decisions, right? Those are two areas where major biases occur in the workplace. So what we're going to do is go and look into both of those actually in a little more detail. So we're going to talk about what types of biases for both. The first being, let me advance the slides, affinity bias. Affinity bias is just what it says and just what we did with the circle of trust exercise, right? It occurs because we are motivated to see ourselves in those who are similar and in a favorable light. And we create what we call these in groups and out groups, these boundaries. And those who are in the in group, we tend to favor, we tend to choose. And then those who are in the out group, we tend to actually look at skeptically or negatively. And to mitigate this type of bias, it requires really for us to actively find common ground with people who are different. Okay. A second type of decision-making bias is called experience bias. And this is where we tend to believe like our perceptions are accurate and that everyone perceives the whole world in the same way that we do. However, neither one of these assumptions are true, right? So you may think that your project is going well, and you might not ask anybody how they think the project's going because you assume that everyone agrees. Another behavior under the experience bias is always going to our go-to people. So tapping the same people on the shoulder for when projects or assignments come up, right? So one way you can mitigate this experience bias is seeking multiple opinions. Actually, just imagining another point of view, right? Building maybe a process that you will receive feedback from different people. Any questions on either one of these so far, affinity or experience bias? No, okay. And then the third one is what we call distance bias. And this occurs with a remote workforce or oftentimes it's also aligned with a project's timeline. So this bias is overlooking individuals who are remote or not on camera. Or with a project, it is valuing like shorter term gains over longer term gains of the project. So to mitigate this bias, it's simple. You just take distance out of the equation. So you want to allow time for your team to collaborate remotely and then form your teams based on skills, not whether you can see them on camera or not, or where they are located, right? We oftentimes forget that, we have a remote workforce and we have people that work in different states. And sometimes when things come up, it's natural, right, for people, especially at the corporate office, to go to someone who's already there, that's close to them, right? We often do that. And with the project, imagining that the shorter term games, like making decisions as if the shorter term games will be fruitful versus thinking long term. So think about what those quick wins, those short term games that you can garner from that project versus thinking, oh my God, this is going to be forever that this project is taking. Like, what are some wins now, and celebrating those wins. So any questions on the three decision-making biases here? Any thoughts, any additional thoughts?
Not a question, but just a thought. I guess I appreciate the inclusion of time in the distance thing, because it's more than just the geography of where somebody's located, but that time element. And it reminds me of recency bias, where we favor what we've most recently experienced. That's another one.
Yeah, that's another one. And actually, we'll talk about that one here too shortly.
Is distance bias, is that newer? Like, is that something that we're bringing more focus since pandemic or since more virtual? Because I know that we had virtual remote work before, but I don't know that I've heard that one before. And I'm just wondering if that's coming forward a lot more.
Yeah, it definitely is with the remote and hybrid work environment. And if you think about it, like, it really does happen, right? It's just, I'm with you, April. When I was doing the research, I was like, you know what, this happens all the time, but no, I've never heard it called distance bias,
Right.
But it makes sense, right? Because it's just, it's unconscious and we do it all the time. And now I think we have to be more intentional because we don't have everyone in the office. Absolutely.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, any other questions here or thoughts? Okay, so we're gonna watch a short video called Jose versus Joe, and who gets the job. So let's take a listen.
My name's Jose Zamora, and I had to drop a letter to get the title. Every morning I wake up, go on Craigslist and apply to as many jobs, every job that I feel qualified for. About 50 to 100 a day for months. No phone calls, no emails, nothing. One day I just thought, what if I try Joe? Just remove the S in my name and maybe I can make some dollar signs. The Monday I decided to go from Jose to Joe, 7 days later, the next Monday, that's when all the responses started coming. That's when all the replies and the emails. The position is open, we want to meet with you, call us back. I was applying for the same exact jobs, the exact same resume, the exact same experience, just a different name. Sometimes I don't even think people know or conscious or aware that they're judging, even if it's by a name, but I think we all do it all the time.
Yeah, we all do it all the time, right? He simply changed his name. So who got the job, Jose or Joe? All right. So when it comes to biases in recruiting and the hiring process, I also want to talk about three biases: anchor bias, status quo bias, and the halo effect bias. So anchor bias, this occurs when we overly rely on the first piece of information that we receive as an anchor to make our decision. So for an example, think about as a recruiter, you have a resume in front of you and that person is showing that they were unemployed for the past year. And you focus on that fact rather than the solid qualifications that that candidate has. Because sometimes, matter of fact, I was reading an article yesterday where a guy who had worked for Google for quite some time, he was high level, and he just decided to leave the organization to take a year off to focus just on what he termed what mattered to him in his life, which was his family. And so he was having anxiety about re-entering the workforce because he had this gap of time on his resume, and he was in a higher level position. So, thinking about that and not understanding really the full story sometimes behind why somebody has an employment gap in their resume, that's where that bias creeps in for us. We make those assumptions, maybe that person was lazy or there's something going on. But, one way we can avoid this bias is instead of relying on that one fact, seek all sides. Ask questions, get feedback before you make the decision. Look at the whole picture. The second type is a status quo bias. And this is our preference for the way things are. So, things remain the same. And this also can result in our resistance to change. So following, the status quo, it's a safe option, right? It takes less effort, but it also results in us becoming stagnant. An example of this is when the company is engaging in the same hiring practices or continuing to go to the same demographic groups. And this may cause us to miss out on some talent, right? And candidates who can bring some fresh ideas to the team, new perspectives to the team. One way we can avoid this bias is to encourage the out of the box thinking, celebrate creativity. We want that, acknowledge it, celebrate innovation, adapting to an open mindset and adapting to changing things up, making change in the process. We want team members who want to come in and push the status quo, right? So that's the second one. Any questions on anchor or status quo bias? Okay, have you guys experienced some of this in your experience in work? Yeah. Okay, so the halo effect bias, and I think this is what you were saying, Erica, is when we develop this overall positive impression of someone because of their qualities or their traits. It's kind of like this love at first sight bias. An example of this could be in recruiting is when a hiring manager sees that a candidate graduated like from a prestigious university. And they assume that, because of this, they excel at their job, right? And this could be furthest from the truth. That candidate could have been fired for misconduct. But because we see that prestigious school on their resume, we assume that this is going to be a great candidate. And then we tend to not look at the whole picture and understand that, the qualities may not match what we are looking for in these roles. And one way we can overcome this bias is to try out like different rounds of interviews. So have different levels of management interview the person, or you can bring someone in that's not on your team and have them interview the person. That way, they're not going to be working with this person day to day, but then they can bring some insight and perspective to that person so that you're just not looking at, the one thing, the halo, this angel type effect of this candidate. Okay. Any questions on any of these biases that we talked about in regards to decision making or in the recruiting and hiring process?
Do you think that this would fit under the Halo one? I've seen a little bit of we use personality assessments, and of course it's a big push recently.
Okay.
And a number of times people will be like, "Oh, you have that same thing. I'm just like you, right? I have that same that same personality pattern or that same thing. So you must be like you're like me. You're just like." And I think that's I think that goes within the Halo part of it.
Yeah, it's also it could also go into the affinity bias too, right? Similar to me, right? Absolutely. All right. Any other questions or thoughts? All right. So I'm going to give you a strategy to mitigating unconscious bias, and this is called the pause strategy, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Pause, right? So one way we can consider to address our biases is to use this strategy, pause, which is pay attention. So pay attention to what's happening. We just talked about unconscious bias and how we filter information a lot of times without even knowing it. So make a conscious, try to make a conscious decision to pay attention to what's going on and acknowledge what your assumptions are, right? Halo, do we have the halo effect? Do we have the recency or affinity, or are we looking at things holistically instead of like what's similar to us or what we're used to as a status quo? Understand that your perspective on things. We all have biases, right? Again, all biases aren't bad, but we all have those biases, and we need to, as much as we can, take our biases out of the process. Seek different perspectives. So, understand that people have different beliefs. They come from different cultures. No one's the same. Not all of us are the same. So seek those perspectives, especially those people who are allies to us. You have resources that you can go to get different perspectives. Bring in a diverse part of our diverse hiring process. We do have a diverse hiring guide. It recommends that we have diverse panels when we bring candidates in to interview. And then lastly, examine what your options are and then make a decision. So sometimes it's going to be an in the moment decision, but if we can, take a minute or two, take a day or two to think about things, sometimes that works as well. All right. So any questions here on unconscious bias? All right, so hopefully I've given you a little bit to think about here. Again, these topics could be 4 and 5 hours long, but I wanted to at least touch base on some of the decision-making and hiring biases that come into, especially in our area, into human resources.
And Yolanda, it's my understanding that we'll dive further into this with the NLI piece, right?
Yes. So the 3 sessions in September will dive into more by unconscious biases and then really the science behind it. So they'll be very interesting, but you'll see some of this material as well in that training, but we'll take a deeper dive a little later. So I just want to introduce this to you guys before that time came, and all the employees will be able to do that training. All right, so now we're going to talk about microaggressions. All right, so microaggressions, this is a term that was coined around the 1970s. A Harvard professor, I think his name's Chester Pierce, and he says it's a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against a marginalized group. And there are 3 forms of microaggressions. The first being the verbal, and this includes comments or questions. That could be considered harmful or discriminatory. So an example would be, telling a woman, "You're so smart for a woman," or calling someone an Indian giver. right? It's a verbal exchange. It's a verbal comment. The second one is a behavioral type microaggression. And this is where you behave in a way that could be harmful or discriminatory. An example of this could be if you're in a restaurant and you observe a waiter intentionally bypassing a group of transgender patrons at a table and going to other tables to service them. So you see their behavior. So it's a behavioral type discrimination. A lot of times subtle. When I taught this course the last time, somebody said, well, how do I know? Because sometimes waiters are just rude, and we all have had rude waiters, right? And we don't know. And that's the thing. We're not going to be experts. No one's an expert in bias. And again, as we said, 90% of our decisions are unconscious. So it's not that we're going to know every time that somebody's offended. But you can tell if a waiter is treating somebody differently. And for the person who's being treated differently, it just leaves them to assume that, right? Because that's what they see. So it may not be. It may be just that it's a rude waiter. But when you do treat people differently, then you leave that open for them to assume those things. And then the last being environmental, and this is one too, April, that I think is sometimes we don't think about, but it's subtle discrimination. Like, for example, when we have buildings that are named after only, white heterosexual men. A lot of times we have conference rooms named after, like Confederate soldiers or things like that. And it could be offensive to a group. This is also, environmental is also where you would see like flags that represent certain beliefs, and they're discriminatory to certain people, a poster, a sign. So that's what we call environmental microaggressions. Any questions on the difference between the verbal, the behavior, or environmental? And a lot of times people who regularly experience these microaggressions, they refer to them as mosquito bites. And that's why I have the big mosquito on there. One time being stung by a mosquito may not be so bad, but when you are constantly being stung over and over, then it becomes energy draining, right? Especially if you're at work, you lack that psychological safety that we talked about in the last session. You don't feel like you belong at work. Microaggressions, it can occur on a daily basis or even hourly basis. And sometimes people don't even know that they're experiencing them. Again, a lot of times it's subtle, unintentional. And then sometimes people don't know that they're even perpetrating them. So we're going to learn a little bit about what types of microaggressions happen at work. I'm going to show you a short video.
Can I make a quick comment on that mosquito? I love that mosquito image, because when I am surrounded by mosquitoes, all I want to do is get away. And if people are feeling that in our workplace, why would we be surprised if they want to get away?
Exactly.
I love that.
Or shut down, right? And don't have that psychological safety that we talked about in the last session. They don't contribute because they feel like, I'm being, discriminated against. So we're going to look at a few examples in the workplace.
Hi, Joe. Sorry I'm late for the call. I had a perfect morning, had to catch the last set.
You surf?
Yeah, I'm at Ocean Beach pretty much all the time. You?
Totally. We'll have to go when I'm up there next week.
Hey, I'm stoked. Epic.
Are you John?
Joe?
Oh, yeah. Great to meet you. I totally had you pictured different in my head.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but, anyways, can I get you a cup of coffee?
Yeah, sure.
My hair looks crazy. It looks like a mess.
I don't believe it. Your hair always looks awesome. I mean, how do you do it? Do you twist it? Do you do it yourself?
Yeah, I twist it myself.
Oh. I mean, do you mind?
Oh. Yeah, actually, I do mind.
Oh, sorry.
But I mean, if you're really curious about it, there are like tons of YouTube videos out now about natural hair, so maybe check that out.
There's no way we were gonna make it to that date.
No. I have no idea what they were thinking. What do you do this weekend?
Going to the beach with some buddies.
Dude, sunscreen. You've already got quite the tan. Where's your family from?
Here.
Yeah, but before here, where are they from?
Still here.
But before that.
A few generations from here.
Cool. Sorry.
Yeah, it happens, right?
Cringeworthy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, like John didn't think Joe could surf. And when he saw him, right, he had pictured somebody else. I'm sure somebody younger, right, when he was thinking about surfing. And then the hair thing, we get that all the time, right? Like, or at least some of us get that. Can I touch your hair or your hair? You know, I know for me as a Black female woman that I change my hair up. Like it'll be long one day and short one day, and people are like, "Oh, how did she do that?" You know, but it happens, right? Yeah. And then the last scenario, you know, she kept, you know, trying to dig to figure out like where, you know, where are you from? Like he couldn't be from, you know, here, you know, where, you know, your skin color is you're permanently tan. You know, those mosquito bites, right? That seem unintentional, you know, innocent comments, but for people who are experiencing those, that sometimes that's harmful. And hurtful, right? All right, so I have some examples on the screen of some more microaggressions that are common. And so what I want us to do is in chat, what I'm going to do is I am going to read you what the message says. And I want you to tell me which of the 8 the microaggressions does it correlate to, okay? Got it? So the first one, I'm going to tell you what it means, and you tell me which one it is, 1 through 8. Okay, your relationship isn't real. You can't be fulfilled. So looking at those different ones, which of the 1 through 8? Six? Yes, absolutely. You're correct. Normally I will throw like some candy or a stuffed toy to you guys, whoever gets it first, but absolutely, great job. Okay, the second one gives the notion that different hairstyles aren't ideal compared to the dominant culture. So which of those? Yep, second one, absolutely. The next one, denying a person's racial ethnic experiences. Number 4, which is I am colorblind. I don't see race. Guess I should read these. Yes, absolutely. That's number 4. Okay, next, your disability must not be that bad. Number 8, I'm so impressed you can do it all with, I can't even see my words. I'm so impressed you can do it all of this with a disability. I don't know how you do it, right? Or you don't look disabled. Absolutely. That's probably more common, right? Okay. People with certain race/gender are all alike. Number 5. Number 5 says, I always get you confused with Sharon, same race, same gender. So that happens, right? I actually, you know, in full transparency, did this just last week when I was in Madison. I thought I was meeting Andrea in the lobby, and she was sitting there with, you know, the AmFam shirt, but I'm so used to seeing people on video, so people just look a little different in real life. So I go over to her and I go, are you Andrea? And she's like, no, I'm Sarah. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, you know, like, and it was just innocent. I thought it was who I thought it was, but then, you know, totally going to go teach a class on microaggressions and just violated every rule that I'm teaching. And I felt horrible about it, but I did apologize to her. So, okay, let's see. People of a certain /sex couldn't occupy a high status position. So number 3, you're the VP, right? Yeah. Okay. Great job. You are not American. You are a foreigner. Right. Number 1, where were you born? A lot of people, and that's a common question people ask, right? Like, where were you born? Because they're curious. But it does, give off like you are not from here, like you are different. What do you say there, Erica? I've also gotten, what are you? Yeah. People asking what your race is or what do you identify as? Yes. Say human. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And then the last one is you don't have enough experience or knowledge, right? That's what's left. Now, how often are we guilty of saying this one? You're just a baby, right? So we're telling that person, oh, well, you don't have no experience, you wait your turn, you'll get it, right? That's the message that it may send to people, right? Yeah. All right. Any thoughts, questions here? Or anybody have any message or microaggression that they like to share that they've experienced? I had someone come up to me after training and say, they were told, your hair looks better straight. I think you'll impress more people if you wore your hair straight. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a good one, right?
I've had something similar to that, this straight hair thing. Yeah.
I had in my old job, somebody asked me when I was going to get married so I didn't have to work anymore.
Oh, wow. Like that's a goal in life, I guess,
yeah.
right?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Any other ones? Anybody want to share?
I had when I was, when my boss found out that I was pregnant, said, well, there goes her work.
Oh, wow.
My goodness.
Wow. What did you, I'm just curious if you don't mind sharing, like, did you say anything or no?
I didn't even know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Right. It just took me so off guard that you're like, well, I'll show him. Like, right? And then I'm thinking, like, who am I to have to prove myself? But I found myself wearing bigger clothes when I met with him and trying to disguise that so that I wasn't judged that way. I don't know that I was as confident to be like, excuse me, what did you just say? So.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about some ways to address those microaggressions when they happen. But I want to first talk about intent versus impact, because I think that's important as well, right? We talked about a lot of this being unconscious, unintentional. But what do you think is more important when it comes to intent versus impact? Any thoughts? Impact?
Yeah, impact for sure.
Yeah, why do you say that?
Well, it's, we need to be thinking deeper about the things we say and the way we act and the things we do. We have to think about whether you can't blame, well, I had the best intent. I didn't mean to do that. We have to think more deeply about what's the impact of our actions and our words.
Right. Like, what's that message, like we just talked about from the previous exercise? What is the message to the other person, right?
Right.
Yeah. And like we said, most of it goes by completely unnoticed and it's subtle, right? Sometimes you may realize it in the moment, like there's this awkwardness and you may realize it, or this, moment of embarrassment. But it is important to look at the intent versus the impact, because our words are separate and have a separate intention from the impact of our words, right? And we have to understand where other people are coming from. When it does happen, we have to address it, right? In the moment, one of the things that you can say is, this is what it sounds like when you say this, or, I feel like, right now, I feel like you're kind of dismissing me, or you're not, taking me serious, or I don't have a seat at the table. And people do, when they engage in these microaggressions, oftentimes they don't intentionally realize that they're coming off as sexist or racist or homophobic. So when you call them a name, such as a racist or a sexist or a homophobic, that's kind of defeats the purpose. It puts them on defense, and it doesn't give them the thought that their intention or their words had an intention. Like they don't learn the lesson of the impact of their words when you call them the names, because now they're focusing on being defensive and not really hearing how their words impacted you personally. So what happens after you have realized that you have offended someone? What do you do? What are some things that you do? Like, I know sometimes there's, like I said, there's this awkward moment when you realize, oh God, I probably shouldn't have said that. Like I did the other day when I went to introduce myself. So what are some things that you could do when you realize you've done it?
Apologize.
Apologize? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, apologize.
I think also be vulnerable. Like, I've walked out of a meeting before and relived something I said, and I came back to the group the next time and said, you know what, I said this and I felt terrible about it.
Yeah.
I just wanted the group to know that I recognized it. And
yeah, exactly. So one thing you could do is apologize. Sometimes, again, you don't know you're saying it until you either get that look or someone says something to you. But then recognize it, right? And then don't do it again. That's really the lesson. Like once you realize you've offended someone, understand how to spot those microaggressions and don't repeat it. You know, some people feel like, oh, I don't feel like I have to apologize, and that's okay. But understand that, you know, people have feelings and they may need time between you and them. But then again, the lesson here is that you don't repeat it, that you realize that you've made a mistake or you've offended someone and that you don't do it again. Thank them for letting you know if they call you out. Absolutely, right? When we create that psychological safety, people should feel free, right, to call you out and point out things that's what creates that psychological safety in that group, and you don't get offended by that, right? Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 ways to handle microaggressions. Like I said, we're all going to make mistakes. It's just nature. It happens. But here are 5 steps that we could do to help handle those microaggressions. The first is learning how to spot them. So that's what we're doing today. We're talking about different microaggressions, learning about them, how they could be unintentional, they could be subtle, but being aware of those will allow you to address them when they arise in the workplace. Second, do your homework. So learn about bias, understand perspectives that are different. And you can do this by joining a BRG. You know, you could do this by, you know, news articles, podcasts, documentaries. Netflix has a huge source of documentary about bias in the workplace. One of the ones that I watched recently was on Abercrombie and Fitch. It's a really good documentary on Netflix. So just educating yourself about bias and diversity and inclusion.
Is that one about size, body size? The Abercrombie and Fitch?
Yeah, it's about a lot of things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, advertising, you know, hiring. Okay. But it's a really good documentary about how Abercrombie and Fitch kind of started and became famous, and then how they've kind of, you know, pretty much gone out of business. So, but watch it. I would say watch it. It's a very educational video. Also think, you know, use the pause method that I introduced to you and think about the impact of your words. You know, is it promoting a growth mindset? You know, are you making a comment that you think it's, you know, promoting someone, or is it making them an exception to their group? You know, welcome opportunities for members of underrepresented groups to educate you, right? And improve your allyship with them. And then fourth, you know, own it. Apologize, as we talked about, and don't repeat it. Learn from your mistakes. And then the last one is to seek out resources. So there's numerous resources like the BRGs, like EAP, like your peer groups, you know, run things by them. So if you don't know what to do, you can always talk to your other leaders about your situations. And get some ideas and bounce some ideas off of them, get some thoughts from them. But you have several resources to connect with other people. So any questions here on the 5 ways to kind of handle microaggressions in the workplace? I think the most important is really us recognizing those and then learning from our mistakes, because we're all going to make them. All right. Okay, so we have about 8 minutes. We're probably not going to get through all of these scenarios. Typically, I would break you into groups, but because we have just a couple of, we don't have enough people and I don't have facilitators today with us. What we're going to do is I'm going to read the scenario, and I just want you to tell me if it's a microaggression or not. And if it is, tell me what you would do as the leader of this person. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free, to come off mute and we'll get started. Okay, so the first scenario is a new Latina employee is asked to introduce herself to the team and mentions that she is from Ecuador. Another employee responds and says, "Wow, you speak English so well. I would have never guessed you were from there." So is this a microaggression?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, it states that, or it signals that being from another country, you don't speak English well, right? And it sends a message that maybe you don't belong here. So how would you handle this microaggression as the manager of this person?
Of the person who said the thing, or of
this was brought to your attention by a Latina employee on your team. That's someone else. Yeah, so how would you handle this if you were the manager of this team?
I think I would take the person aside, or, create a safe space and just mention to them, that this is what I heard, or this is what was said, and it could make that person feel uncomfortable, because it's implying that they're not native to America or English speaking, and I don't know. That's a tough one.
It's a tough one, right?
Bring it to their attention and just have a dialogue about it,
Yeah, I definitely. I think you have some options as a leader. You can pull the person aside, and let them know, hey, this is what it sounded like. I'm not sure if that was your intention. Or you can have the person who was perpetrated the microaggression actually go and talk to the other person about it if they feel comfortable, right? That's another option, right? Because you don't want anybody to confront someone and have a hostile situation. But if they feel comfortable going to the other person to have that conversation, you can also do that. All right, let's do the next one. This one is, you have a tenured white male employee who recently got passed up for a promotion. He is overheard in a team huddle saying that this current climate at AmFam is geared towards only promoting women and minorities, and there isn't a place for men like him in leadership anymore. Thoughts? Is this a microaggression? The situation.
I don't know if it's a microaggression, maybe it is, but either way, however it's labeled, it probably needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it is a microaggression. It signals, the message that it signals is the company is making exceptions to promote based on race or gender to meet a quota possibly, and they are not hiring the most qualified individuals.
There's the piece right there.
Yeah. So how would you respond to this person who didn't get the promotion? Like, what would you say about the hiring practices of AmFam?
I would probably bring it to the person's attention that the unintentional piece of what he is saying is whoever got that promotion didn't deserve it. And I would ask if, are you speaking to knowing this person's qualifications, or maybe just call out the fact that maybe you don't know that person's experience, and labeling it in the big group scenario that this is a whole AmFam thing. What goes back on him and his qualifications, and what could he do to make himself ready for the next level, not comparing himself.
Yes, absolutely. Right. When we don't have quotas, right? So again, it's part of our strategic plan, but we don't have a certain quota that we have to meet. We hire for the best qualified candidate, regardless, right, of the position. And we have to hire. We don't have these quotas. So not, just maybe explaining to him the way that we hire, the way that we interview, the process. And again, maybe even coming up with a development plan for him to see what it takes for him to get to the next level, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll do one more and then we'll close it up. You have a Black employee who's on a project team that is getting ready to launch a new product. During a team meeting, the project team leader asked her opinion on whether she thought Black people would buy the new product and use it. So is this a microaggression?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And what message do you think it signals?
Black people are a homogenous blob.
Yeah, like she can represent all, right, the same race. She's the one person who can represent all of the Black race. So how do you handle this microaggression? What could be done here?
Take the project team leader aside and let them know that the language they're using is tokenizing and inappropriate.
It's offensive, maybe. And what a solution that you could offer that project lead? What are some alternatives that he could do to get that information that he's seeking?
That there are a multitude of ways to get data on different market segments, but polling individual employees is not the right way to go about that.
Right, or one person doesn't represent everyone. So how about you get a lot more people involved, right, in testing the product and getting their opinion? Yeah. So so these are just some examples, you guys, and these are some real life, examples that we try to throw at you. And it's tough, right? Sometimes you just don't know, but you have to just really educate yourself, right, and learn and to learn how to spot these types of microaggressions in the workplace. Again, no one expects anyone to be an expert. These things happen in our unconscious minds. They're subtle, unintentional, and it's going to take intention for us to really focus on, how we work work with each other and how we communicate with each other, how we make decisions in the way that we do, whether that's a hiring or just a normal decision in your work, your workplace. But yeah, so I don't, no one expects anyone to be an expert. If you know someone in this world who doesn't have a bias, then please let them call me because I want to talk to them and learn from them. So we're going to make those mistakes. And so hopefully this training has helped you today to at least just think about it. And as Eric and I mentioned, we're going to dive deeper into unconscious bias more later in September. But if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those questions. And if not, I promised you we'll be right at an hour. So we are right at 1 o'clock. And I will stay on for any questions or happy to answer them now.
Thank you, Yolanda. This was really great.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch and enjoy your time back. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
She's good.
She is good.
Oh, I'm still on. Thank you.
There's your feedback.
I love it. Thank you.
Bye, Yolanda.